Okay, so this is Monopoly Nerd here. Just wanted to give you guys a breakdown of how to use the first version of the Monopoly simulator that I've created. It's not the prettiest or easiest to use GUI just yet, but it's enough to get started. So here we have the main page. Obviously, there's the big Monopoly board, kind of hard to miss. It starts with 2 players, since that's the bare minimum needed to have a real game going. And if you want additional players, you can just click on the Add Player button, and it'll create a 3rd player here, 4th player, and all the way to 6 players, which is the maximum allowed for a real Monopoly game. So to reset the position at any time, you just hit the New Position Reset button, and it gets back to where it was. So let's move forward. Let's set up a pretend game here. And let's say each player has about $800 cash. And let's say that by clicking the Select Properties, you'll see these little stickers of mortgaged and unmortgaged pop up along the board. And obviously I'd like to improve the look of those. It's kind of hard to click. But if you click right on the one you want, then each one you click will assign that property in whichever state that you click to player 1. So for example, if we want to give player 1 the green properties, and I click unmortgaged for Pacific, unmortgaged for North Carolina, and unmortgaged for Pennsylvania, those 3 properties show up here, and also get highlighted red and that's from player 1's perspective. That means that, okay, you own these properties. So just for completion, I'm going to grab some mortgage properties too, which a lot of times will happen late in the game. 2 players kind of dominate, and they mortgage everything else off so they can build houses on the one property group that they want to focus on. So moving on to that, if we click the Build Houses Hotels, as you can see, the simulator is smart enough to know that, okay, the only properties that are unmortgaged and that are all owned by you are the greens, so it gives these little plus marks to add the houses in. So when building the houses, it sticks to the same rules of the game. You can't add more than one more. The differential between any 2 spaces can't be more than 1 house, so I'm clicking here and nothing's happening because it knows that, hey, I can't have 4 houses if the other 2 properties have 2. Right, as of now, there's no way to do a minus or to undo any of these decisions, so unfortunately you had to click the New Position Reset to start over. It's something that I'm going to be working on and coming out with a fix for very soon. Now, let's also place a token here. So when you click Place Token, the wheelbarrow shows up on every possible square on the boards, and you just have to click on the one that represents where you want the wheelbarrow to start. So let's start with Boardwalk, let's say. So it puts it sideways because it's on the side of the board, but it is there. So the 3 things left here are whether or not the person wants to stay in jail. And for the most part, this simulator is made for late game situations. It's not smart enough to understand the idea behind good trading and stuff. So this assumes that trades are already done and everyone's looking to build as fast as possible and basically win the game without any further trading. So in that stage of the game, it's usually better to stay in jail as long as possible so that you don't land on your opponent's property. So I'm going to stick with that strategy. As far as a building strategy, I've created 2 strategies. One is called hyper aggressive, and what that means is anyone using that building strategy, any money they have at any given time, no matter what point in the game it is, they will build on their properties. And that really doesn't make much sense, so I came up with what's called a smart aggressive strategy. And it's a little long-winded to get into, so just needless to say that it takes things such as probability of getting landed on and safety, and the potential damage that you can incur by landing on your opponent. It takes that stuff into account. So for the most part, I would stick with that strategy. It's pretty realistic for someone who's trying to win the game. And then, of course, you have to pick your color group that you want to build on going forward. The simulator is intelligent with regard to building. So if you select the greens here, which makes sense since we're already building there, the computer will know if it loses some money, it'll sell houses from the greens, and if it makes more money later, it will continue to build the houses. It doesn't always stay the same. Okay, so moving on to our second player, I'm going to go a little more quickly this time. As you can see, when you click Select Properties for Player 2, it highlights which properties are already controlled by Player 1. and it still gives you the options of which ones are still for sale. So let's give player two rather, the magentas, and let's make everything else mortgaged. And the reason I'm doing this mortgaged is because it helps to take any noise, so to speak, out of the situation. So we're only looking at the greens versus the magentas. We're not looking at any other factors. Now, granted, you can do whatever you want with the simulator, and you can leave things unmortgaged, mortgaged, unpurchased. But I think if you really want to get good results and get a good idea of how the greens post up against the magentas, I would suggest mortgaging everything else. Anyway, so building houses now. Since we put a bunch on the greens, let's put a bunch on the magentas. Let's do 4 on each. By the way, the simulator is smart enough to take into account the number of houses allowed in a game, which is 32, and the number of hotels, which is 14. So it won't let you go beyond those limits. Try to make it as realistic as possible. So again, we're going to go with the long jail stay for player 2. Player 2 is going to also do the smart aggressive strategy and, of course, building on the magentas. So here you have it. Everything is set in place. Player 2 starting on Pennsylvania Avenue. Player 1 on Boardwalk. Keep in mind that the player 1 will always go first, and the move order for the simulator is always from top to bottom. So player 1, then player 2 will go. So my instinct tells me that player 2 should have a slight edge here, but that's the whole point of the simulator, is to see where your instincts are wrong and where they're right. So if you click Get Win Percentages here, it queries the server, and within a few seconds should come back with the answer to this. There it is. So see, in fact, I was wrong. Player 1 has a 55.6% chance of winning in the long run, assuming, well, given this scenario, and given 10,000 games, 5,560 of the games were won by player 1, and only 4,440 were won by player 2. So I was actually wrong, and I think it kind of shows that, once you get some houses going on the greens, they are in fact very powerful. But it's still very close. So again, I plan to change the simulator down the road where it's very easy. You can, once you get your results, you can go back and say, okay, let's adjust this slightly. Let's take away a house here or there. Let's add a hotel here or there. And you can play with it, or you can move the pieces around to really see the differences that occur. It's really pretty remarkable. I've played with it a lot, and the slightest changes, the things that might seem totally irrelevant, actually can make huge differences. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoy. If you have any questions, you can always shoot me an email at jag47@cornell.edu, or check out my blog at monopolynerd.wordpress.com.